Today we have two very cool speakers who are doing real deployments with customers of AI agents. And I'd love to invite you both to just give a kind of pitch of what you've been working on and what you're doing with agents.
I know what you're doing.
Sure. Nice to meet you all. Ayna, co-founder and CEO of Morpho AI. So we basically build hardware foundation models, and the way you have LLMs for text, we actually use hardware models that we built internally to be able to convert components into functioning machine designs. Except for, in our space, one of the biggest questions is, where is the data for hardware? Where do you even find something as simple as a cost, a component? How do you define how those components can be linked together? And so the way we've kind of found a way to be able to circumvent this and actually get the data to build our foundation models is through agents. And we have agents that we've built internally for something even as simple as like, hey, I have this CAD drawing with like 300 parts. Like, how much does that even cost? Or how do I even think about what types of components I can use and what types of motors I can use? How do you be able to effectively search a design space and be able to extend that to all different types of hardware? So we're a team of 6 people, a bunch of PhDs that have written about 50 plus papers in the space. And we essentially are productizing the agents. So instead of giving our customers the ability to fine tune them, we actually come in and give them the product so that they never have to even go through the pain of customization.
Thanks, Ayna. I'm Jags Kandasamy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Latent AI. We are a spin-off from Stanford Research Institute, SRI Menlo Park, original technology developed for DARPA. We started with building developer tools for AI engineers. How do you help them build AI models for the edge devices? That journey led us through the way in obfuscating and abstracting the complexity of those tooling to serve the software engineer. That is when we introduced the agents. We started taking different AI models and a range of hardware from Raspberry Pi all the way to NVIDIA high-end Blackwell GPUs. And we tune the model, run them on hardware, and measure how fast they run, how much time they take, or what is the inference time, and power, and about 20 different attributes. We started collecting them. And we've run over 200,000 hours of this edge compute data, and we've collected around 12 terabytes of this information. With the tooling, with this data, we introduced the agent that does about 4 different functions, from requirement gathering to model building to training and to testing. Right? So you have an agent that does, okay, I want to build, you ask the question of like, I want to build a human detection algorithm to run on a drone. And my drone has a Snapdragon processor. The agent will quickly give you, this is the recipe to use, this is the inference time you're going to get, and it'll give you all the steps. From VS Code, you can easily get the code, plug it in, and ready to go. From weeks and months of iteration to hours. That's what we've solved.
Wow. Those are exceptionally cool applications of genuine AI, I think, in the world. I guess to close out introductions, I am Tobin. I'm a research fellow here at Stanford University, where we run the Loyal Agents Initiative, which is a partnership with Consumer Reports on consumer protection for AI agents. And I'm also the head of AI agents for WorkOS, which is a security vendor that sells to all of the AI labs, Anthropic, Perplexity, OpenAI, Cursor, et cetera, et cetera. We do a lot of agent building. Do you want to?
I'm Frazer Anderson. I'm a managing director at Link Ventures, and I'm here because it doesn't work aesthetically to have an empty chair.
Well, I'd actually love if you talk about some of the portfolio companies that you're invested in, because you have a ton of agent building companies in your portfolio.
Yeah, so I would say the thing that's kind of clear as day for us, and Collect is actually one of them, is the prosumer market is the place where everything is happening. And I don't know if we've sort of retrained people, but I think that might be kind of capturing the zeitgeist, because I think at least our generation, there's very little separation between work and life. I mean, we're sort of working all the time, but we're also hardly working. And I think we've sort of got a behavior now that you buy this productivity tool, which you use in your personal life, as well as to create more free time for yourself at work. And you just pull out the company credit card, or you hit the expense account at the end of the week, and it's not a big dollar amount. So I think it's not just a consequence of the technology being really good when you can give it feedback for the thing you're trying to accomplish right away, very fast. I think there's also something kind of broader in society that's enabled this kind of bottoms-up prosumer revolution within the Gen AI space.
I think that's a really interesting thematic trend. And to dissect that into 2 parts, there are folks who will talk about AI agents as these general purpose AI that can go and do everything on your behalf. And then there are these more structured, tailored workflow automations where you take a task that you're doing repeatedly and you automate that with really sophisticated AI. What across the deployment distributions you're seeing in customers do you see between those two? What does it look like?
It's a great question. So latent AI primarily serves the Department of Defense. From Friday, it's been Department of War. We've been helping a lot of operational effects, right? Like from deploying AI to drones, to unmanned submarines, surface vehicles, satellites, and other things, right? So as we see, there is this iterative process of getting a model down to the edge, because one of the Navy use cases, they took about 12 plus months trying to get that done. When you're in a cost plus contract, it is most favorable to do that, right? Iteration is paying your bills. But the moment it becomes a fixed price contract from a business sense, then you're trying to get to the result as quickly as possible, right? So this is where there is an incentive alignment there. As researchers, as engineers, we like the process of solving the problem. Not just solving the problem, but we like the process of solving the problem. So there, the business sense comes into play, and how do we cut it out and get the result done, right? And then there are other repetitive processes that nobody wants to touch, right? There, it's easier to automate and it's easier to adopt.
Yeah, I think the 80-20 rule very much applies. You'll see, your customer set doing roughly all the same things, but especially where, when you're selling to hardware, you do have this very long tail of startups and new age folks, but the rest of it is candidly just a lot of enterprise. And the reality of how R&D exists in enterprises is very much everyone has their own team construct, everyone has their own set of databases, ERPs, what have you. And so, what we aim to mostly do is, okay, I have a base way and technology of being able to work in, but what I deploy it into in terms of the team is going to change. My users might change a little bit. The type of PLMs that I plug into need to change. And so there's that level of, customization and tailoring that I don't think, technology candidly has made it to that point that, you can get away with the customization part quite yet. But you can be sure that, hey, do my algorithms actually work and actually get me to the point of, hey, can actually search over the 300 parts, can actually search over your CAD database? You can conceptually at least do that. And so I think that's the remaining challenge as I see about deploying agentic systems is, if you think about the construct of an organization, which is where your workflows live amongst multiple people, the way they interact is going to look so vastly different when you go organization to organization that I think, cracking that repetition is that big challenge then.
I would say the things that I've seen work from a kind of product perspective are where you have kind of LLM on the back end plus some MCP servers or other data integrations, plus a bit of kind of help you do some context engineering. That is working, though I think there's definitely a bit of an adoption curve, because for somebody that needs that setup, it means they probably haven't kind of gone out and spent a lot of time with ChatGPT themselves, because they might just use that. The other use case, which I think has been pretty cool at the enterprise that I've seen, it's a business called AI1, which we invested in, and they've basically built agents to deliver a kind of data mesh, which feels like a sort of snowflake without the data lake migration. So use all this semantic search to go out, find data where it exists today, and start with smarter enterprise search. But now that you kind of have the data, it can query it across different databases without having to move it. Very important for the enterprise, deploy on your in your environment. Now we can start to kind of kick off workflows. Though I would say the kicking off workflows thing is still very nascent, because I still think it's very hard to zero shot these. And maybe it's because I'm an absolute Philistine, but I don't think it's that.
When I think a lot of the artistry here is in context engineering, which is a term that didn't exist 2 years ago and is now a key skill in one's career. And a lot of the important things an agent needs is stored in someone's brain, not on a piece of paper or in a document database you can look up. So as you're seeing these deployments, what are the main blockers in actually getting agents into the world? Is it context engineering and getting that plugged in? Is it security and putting things on the edge? Is it reliability? Is it the capability of these models to do things like manufacturing? What are you guys seeing as the main blocker?
I would say all three. I would start with the context engineering part, right? Let's say this is a public news, so I can talk about it. So we helped Navy deploy mine detection models on a submarine drone, or UUV, right? When you look at sonar data, anybody who's looked at sonar data in a vision form, right? So
Slightly
it is it's a mostly difficult thing to decipher. Like, you look at a geospatial data, that's different. You're looking at Google Maps, Google Earth and stuff, that's different to a sonar data. There is a clear contextual engineering from the sailor that's looking at that data day in and day out. So you've got to take that information and you have to understand, okay, how fast does the sub need to move? What is the FPS that we need to target for that particular use case, right? And what is the acceptable inference accuracy over here, right? Is it 80%? Is it 70%? Or do we need high 90s? Right?
So it's about that feedback loop of meeting the requirements of this agent in a very particular use case and figuring out the design around that.
Exactly. And then the second part around security is that we are deploying these models at the edge. As you deploy it at the edge, the first thing that we assume is that these devices are going to be lost, shot, or captured. When you do that, you don't want your adversary to be able to easily pluck the model out, pluck the engineering out, and go reverse engineer, or Trojan horse them back into us and cause havoc, right? There are instances of this happening in the corporate world, but this also happens in the defense side. So how do you address that security issue through the agentic workflow? How do you instill confidence that what you're building is going to be secure, encrypted, watermarked? Those are the features that we provide as we deliver the solution to the customer.
We see this, I work for a security vendor and companies trying to build agents, and agents by definition are connected to the world and take action in the world. And that is by design a security risk and is one of the biggest blockers I see on deploying it.
And one other point to that, right? Like our agents work in the VS Code environment right now. Anytime our agents do an action, we actually ask the permission from the user. We are not automatically doing it. Because the moment you're touching certain system resources, you don't want that to be a vulnerability that left open through your agentic flow.
Is that in contrast to you, Ayna? Are you letting these things run autonomously to collect data?
Yes and no. To some degree, there's this big question mark of, where is the data? Because so much of this is actually proprietary. And I would say that's probably, like, at least for the areas that we sell into, the biggest roadblocker is how do you gain that trust? And it's not just trust of, can I work with you? It's trust of, I'm giving you access to, like, my IP, my core business that I don't want my competition to be able to see or learn from. And so how do you gain that confidence from your customer that has been in a legacy business for a really long time, that prides themselves on having the ability to create new and CAD files, being able to create and deploy new machines in the world, that we're not only just taking away autonomy from them, that we're actually helping them. I think the second area where we typically, quite shockingly, hear very, very frequently, not from our buyers, but from our users, is, oh, you're basically out here to replace me. Quite frequently, the very first pitch where I'm there to say, we're nowhere close to replacing them, by the way, but the very first time we very directly hear from, like, your very typical mechanical engineer, oh, this sounds like something that will replace my job. And to be able to get them on board, to collaborate with you, to actually give you access to the things that you need so that you can actually get to that 20% finish line of being able to build out and deploy something to them is not as easy as you would think. I think the trust exists kind of like in those two aspects. And then the last thing I would say is, actually when you're working on certain mission critical things, the risk of being fired for something that doesn't work is really, really high. I think that's a little bit easier for things that are more qualitative and more discretionary. But if you build out a machine that kills somebody, you are most certainly getting fired. So how do you instill that confidence on something that is actually going to work? Not necessarily well, but to the level that is not going to get them into trouble. And I think that's like the tricky thing into like selling into a little bit more of the legacy side of things.
I did have just one story that I heard recently, which I think brings home this point, is I was speaking to an entrepreneur who I certainly won't name, who was doing some competitive research on one of the companies that he sees as potentially competitive, and was talking to its chatbot, and then thought, well, I may as well ask. So, like, what do you built on the back end? It's like, oh, I'm Claude, and like fine-tuned, and he just started pulling IP out of the chatbot. So. It's like kind of an insane thing that's happened, but I'm sure it's not an isolated case.
Frazer's full of great stories. If you're ever free on an afternoon, ping him.
I want to add one more thing to the resource side, right? Like replacing jobs. One of the things that we immediately saw with our agents is that like software engineers can use it, and actually one QA engineer, she took the agent and she built a people detection model to run on a Raspberry Pi. She has zero AI knowledge. She's not done any machine learning course classes, nothing. She just took the agent, she just chatted with it, and she built a high-performant people detection model running on a Raspberry Pi.
Wow. That's super cool. We've been seeing for the last 2 years increasingly developers building automations and workflows for their life. Increasingly coding is done with coding agents and assistants. What do you think it's going to take to really see these workflow automations or general purpose agents for consumers or employees that are non-technical in organizations? Will it take your various startups to sell them a product?
Well, I think we're very close. Our COO, who's a very, very bright guy, has a ton of business context. He's become an absolute monster with Zapier and using OpenAI and Claude's various connectors. The things that he can do now certainly would have required quite a lot of software engineering skill to do 3 years ago. So I would say to anybody who's non-technical in the audience, the capability's already there. So what's your excuse? So I think we're there for a lot of use cases. We talked about it, I think, a little bit the other day at the bar about how the kind of proliferation of agents that go in and capture data from different parts of the kind of data silo, because really that's sort of what most of us knowledge workers do. We just take data from disparate systems, analyze it, annotate it, send it to another system, usually not using natural language. I think some kind of sort of agreement or protocol standard for the exchange of that information is going to help it proliferate. Because a lot of the things that I vibe code, frankly, if I was just on one company's stack, I could do it with their Claude integration or whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I think some of it ultimately comes down to will this get me fired or not? I cannot emphasize this enough. I think as you get deeper and deeper into things that there's more judgment and there's more numbers involved. I think that is the level of confidence that you want to be able to show to someone. So I think that there's definitely a level of an adoption curve. But I think some of it is actually going to come with talent switching over. What we see very, very frequently in a lot of the startups that we sell into is how many of them are actually trying to build out workflows on their own. Mechanical engineers are not a group of people that typically like to code, but that is happening. So we definitely see that in kind of the Gen Z millennial crowd. They are getting their hands dirty and trying to build things out. So I think some of it is going to come with someone moving to a bigger organization and making that push, or someone who's actually in the decision-making authority, feeling hey, this is not going to make sure that I'm leaving the organization tomorrow. So I think it's ultimately coming down to, the trust piece.
The generational shift is a key thing from my observation, right? So you go into the baby boomer generation to the Gen X, Gen Z, and as you go to, from analog natives to digital natives, now to AI natives. So there is that shift that needs to happen as well from an easy adoption perspective. I give you a defense example, right? The generals are all either late baby boomers or early Gen Xers, right? So when you look at them, they all grew up with pen and paper, and then they got computer thrust into them in mid-career or early career. Right? The way they look at systems is completely different than, let's say, my daughter who grew up as a digital native. And there are young sailors, airmen, and infantrymen that are coming in, or that are in leadership positions, at least at a lieutenant or a captain level. These are all native digital folks. They look at systems completely different. They think systems are part of them. So for them, the observation and implementation of workflows is very easy. So that generational shift, as we go through, I think we'll see that.
I totally agree. Frankly, I feel like we have a good captive audience who at least believes AI agents are worth building. I'm curious. I really loved your comment on the Zapier flows, and I'd love to hear what folks are using themselves to build AI agents, what that stack looks like, what is useful in your life or out in the wild. I'll throw my confession in that if you've received an email from me anytime in the last month or two, the first draft was fully written by AI, potentially the entire email I sent, with a controlled system prompt in Zapier that I very carefully crafted over time to tailor to how I like to respond to relevant emails. And that's just one example of a little workflow you can do. What else are you guys building or seeing out in the wild?
I mean, my cold outbound is entirely now, in terms of like how I source like the people, in terms of like, just like add like these 50 people on LinkedIn and like do this like day in, day out. Like I don't need to be like spending time clicking as long as, I'm there to like make that decision and guide it.
Are you using that thing like EXO, that new benchmark company? It's like the...
No, some of it is Clay, and then there's one other that's like primarily for LinkedIn outbound, which, by the way, if any of you are doing sales, I highly recommend they actually view as a real person because nobody responds to emails anymore, it feels like. But yeah, so much of like that repetitive clicking motion of like, hey, can you create something that is, slightly tailored to this person? Like, I don't need to spend like my best decision-making hours like doing genuinely very repetitive work, but it's also not to the point that I need to like, hire like 10 salespeople on my team. And candidly, why should I? It's much more effective if a founder reaches out to someone and say, want to work with me versus, saying, here's my AE, please deal with them.
I like to use like Claude Code plus Cursor. You just get like more customization. And I also, the comment you made about you like to actually solve the problem, not just get the solution. So my like latest creation, which is still pretty rough around the edges, is kind of a daily chief of staff that reads my calendar, like reads all the emails associated with each meeting, like why I might want to talk to them, a couple of intelligent things to ask, and a few like pertinent kind of news headlines around what we're going to talk about.
See, this is where the age difference shows up right here, right? So my latest automation is right-click, add something to my task list. Right? So I still believe in like, the personal touches. Like I'm an avid networker, and my relationships, within the DoD, I'm at the E-Ring all the time. I'm meeting people in person, and these are the people that want to be met in person and have a chat, right? Like I will fly to DC for a 30-minute meeting. Okay, yes, a lot of people would think that's a waste of time, but that relationship is much more stronger than any cold email or any Zoom call or a Teams call that you can have, right? So from automation perspective, I'm at the very low end.
So I really like that comment because I still think in-person is one of these things that's still special. AI agents are not coming for hanging out with someone, having a human connection. But I would love to hear, in kind of our final take of the day, where you're seeing the world going in a year or two's time, and what you think that will look like. Is it just an agent sets up meetings with you via Clay and LinkedIn cold DMs, and then you're having constant in-person meetings all day? What do you think that future looks like in a year from now?
It's a great question. See, how long has it been since we had this AI email agent that was supposed to schedule your meetings? That fell by the wayside. Then came Calendly, then Google Calendar, options of this. But still, we are having email back and forth in scheduling that meeting. Can we solve that?
You just need a better agent.
On both sides.
On both sides, certainly.
Right, the distribution of those, right? So I think where technology becomes so reliable, that future can exist. But from my perspective, where I sit, I think it's going to be more than a couple of years.
I think I was having this conversation with somebody who's like very high up at a unicorn, and this is how we think about building teams, which I think is reflective of where and how agents will play. There's two types of talent that are really going to exist. One is going to be like absolute like ICs, like you're specialists and you're brilliant at that. And then the second is people that own relationships. That is never going to get replaced. I will talk about cold outbound all day, but I'm still picking up the phone. I'm still flying to my customers, and showing up in the middle of North Carolina to try and convince them to work with us. Like that is never going to go away. And I think there's that human touch and interaction that agents are not going to take away. There's all this discourse about like, two sales chatbots will talk to each other. No deals are going to get done. People work with people at the end of the day, and I think that's the reality, and that's probably never going to change. I think everything else in the middle, that's like the grunt work of I'm not able to like go build, I'm not able to go sell, I think is probably going to get automated.
I think one of the rate limiting factors is actually kind of our sort of societal mores. One of my mentors ran a very, very large public company, and I remember when I wanted to bring like Calendly into the organization, and he was like, Frazer, I don't know if you can actually send that to one of our stakeholders, one of our clients. Like that's just, it doesn't feel good. And I would say it probably took 3 months, and then of course now he's a Calendly power user. He would never do it the other way. So I do think, there's a really nice app called Willow, which allows you to like FN and then speak naturally into your computer, and then it will kind of turn it into business appropriate language. And it feels a little bit LLM written. So I think a combination of these things starting to feel a little bit more natural, having some kind of a RAG system to put your voice in naturally, plus I think us just getting used to these things, that will need to change, I think, probably in the next 18 months. That's going to change.
Well, these are all great takes. Thank you very much for being on this panel with me. This was great fun. Thank you very much.